Welcome to the Warm Cozy Blanket channel. Today will be an unusual story in the genre of psychological philosophical thriller. You will find out whether the pastor can come to terms with the harsh realities and whether he will remain true to his faith. Make yourself comfortable, subscribe to the channel, and I will start my story. Prologue: The Metaphysics of Conflict. Wars are born in the minds of men, but they grow into bodies that devour everything in their path. What we call reality is often just a collective hallucination, a shared dream so powerful it becomes indistinguishable from truth. In 1861, America fractured along invisible fault lines, splitting itself into two competing ideologies. Or perhaps there was only one America all along, staring at its reflection in a cracked mirror. The Civil War was not merely a clash of armies or economies, it was a battle of symbols. For the North, it was a crusade to preserve the Union, an experiment in democracy that had never been tried before. For the South, it was a defense of tradition, sovereignty, and what they called liberty. But beneath these grand narratives lay something far more primal: fear. Fear of change, fear of loss, fear of the unknown. What if the war wasn't real? What if it was merely an illusion designed to teach humanity something it refused to learn any other way? This question haunted Reverend Jonathan Blake, a man who once believed he could stand above the fray, until the war swallowed him whole. Chapter 1: The Quiet Before the Storm. Cross Creek was a town where time seemed to move slower than elsewhere. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, it exuded an almost sacred stillness. The church stood at the heart of this quietude, its white steeple piercing the sky like a prayer frozen midair. Here, Reverend Jonathan Blake preached sermons on love, forgiveness, and the divine order of things. Jonathan had always been a man of faith, though his faith was tinged with doubt. He saw God as both omnipotent and indifferent, a cosmic artist who painted universes but never lingered to admire them. His congregation loved him for his kindness and trusted him for his wisdom, even when they disagreed with him. And disagree they did. Cross Creek was no stranger to the debate over slavery. Some farmers argued it was a necessary evil, others claimed it was God's will. Jonathan tried to mediate these disputes, quoting scripture to soothe tempers and mend rifts. But lately the arguments had grown sharper, more personal. Families divided. Friends stopped speaking. Something dark loomed on the horizon, though few dared name it aloud. One evening, as Jonathan sat by the window reading Augustine's City of God, he felt a strange unease. Outside, the wind rattled the branches of the old oak tree, and shadows danced across the room like restless spirits. For the first time in years, he wondered whether his words mattered at all. He thought about the nature of belief. Was faith simply a construct, a mental framework humans used to make sense of chaos? Or was it something deeper, a connection to a higher truth that transcended human understanding? These questions gnawed at him, especially now, when the world around him seemed to be unraveling. That night he dreamed of a great machine, a vast, intricate mechanism that hummed with energy. Inside the machine, tiny figures scurried about, unaware of the gears turning above them. One figure looked up, saw the machine, and screamed. The sound woke Jonathan with a start. He sat upright in bed, sweat dripping down his face. What did it mean? Was the war the machine grinding humanity into dust? And if so, who were the engineers? Chapter 2: The Breaking Point. News of Fort Sumter reached Cross Creek on a Tuesday. By Friday, the town had split into two camps. Union supporters gathered at the tavern, drinking whiskey and vowing loyalty to the Stars and Stripes. Confederates met secretly in barns, plotting strategies and swearing oaths to their fledgling nation. Jonathan watched helplessly as the chasm widened. At Sunday service, he delivered a sermon titled Brother Against Brother. He spoke passionately about unity and reconciliation, urging his flock to remember their shared humanity. But his words fell flat. Afterward, a farmer named Elias stormed up to him, red-faced and trembling. "You're either with us or against us, preacher," Elias spat. "There's no middle ground anymore." That night, lying awake beside his sleeping wife, Jonathan replayed the confrontation in his mind. Was Elias right? Could neutrality exist in times like these, or was it simply another form of cowardice? He thought of Abraham, willing to sacrifice Isaac at God's command, of Christ, crucified for preaching peace. Hadn't history shown that those who sought compromise were often the first casualties of conflict? Over the next few weeks, Jonathan observed the transformation of his town. Men who had once greeted each other warmly now avoided eye contact. Women whispered behind closed doors, speculating about which side would prevail. Even children played war games, dividing themselves into Yankees and rebels. Jonathan began to see the war as a kind of virus, infecting everyone it touched. It spread through letters, newspapers, rumors. It fed on fear and anger, growing stronger with each passing day. And yet there was something strangely seductive about it. People who had previously led mundane lives suddenly found purpose in the struggle. They spoke of glory, honor, destiny. The war gave them meaning, but at what cost? Chapter 3: Transformation. As weeks turned into months, Jonathan found himself changing. The war crept into every corner of life, reshaping relationships, distorting values. Soldiers passed through Cross Creek, some heading north, others south. They spoke of glory and honor, but Jonathan saw only fear in their eyes. One day, a wounded soldier arrived at the church seeking shelter. His name was Thomas, and he bore a scar across his cheek that twisted his smile into a grimace. Over tea, Thomas told Jonathan stories of battlefields littered with corpses, of comrades dying in agony, of dreams shattered under cannon fire. "Why do you fight?" Jonathan asked. "For freedom," Thomas replied without hesitation. "For my home, my family, for the South." But later, as Thomas slept, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that the young man's answers were hollow. Freedom, home, family, these were abstractions, masks worn by deeper, darker impulses. Perhaps the war itself was a mask, concealing humanity's eternal struggle against chaos. Jonathan began to notice patterns everywhere. The way the sun cast shadows on the church floor resembled the stripes of the American flag. The crackling of the fireplace sounded like distant gunfire. Even the hymns sung during service took on new meanings, their lyrics echoing themes of sacrifice and redemption. He started writing in a journal, documenting his thoughts and observations. At first, the entries were sporadic, fragmented, but as the war dragged on, they became more frequent, more coherent. He wrote about the paradox of violence committed in the name of peace, the absurdity of killing to preserve life. He questioned whether humanity was capable of true progress or doomed to repeat its mistakes indefinitely. One entry reads, "The war is not outside us, it is within. Each bullet fired is a fragment of our own souls, torn apart by doubt and desire. We build nations, then destroy them because creation requires destruction. Is this the cycle of existence or merely the madness of men?" These reflections brought him little comfort. If anything, they deepened his despair, yet they also gave him clarity. The war was not just a political or military conflict, it was a spiritual crisis, a test of humanity's capacity for self-awareness and growth. Chapter 4: Reality versus Illusion. By now, Jonathan had begun to question everything. Were the soldiers fighting for ideals, or were they puppets in a grand performance orchestrated by forces beyond comprehension? One afternoon, while walking through the woods, he encountered a mysterious traveler named Silas. Clad in tattered robes, Silas claimed to be a philosopher or perhaps a prophet. "The war is not real," Silas said cryptically. "It is a hologram projected onto the minds of men. Its purpose is not destruction, but enlightenment." Jonathan laughed nervously. "If it's not real, then why does it hurt so much?" "Because pain is how we learn," Silas replied. "Without suffering, there can be no growth." That night, Jonathan dreamed of a battlefield bathed in golden light. Soldiers dropped their weapons and embraced, tears streaming down their faces. Above them, a figure resembling Christ floated, arms outstretched. "The true enemy lies within you," he said softly. "Conquer it and the war will end." When Jonathan awoke, he felt a strange sense of calm. The dream lingered in his mind, vivid and unshakable. He realized that Silas's words, though seemingly absurd, contained a kernel of truth. The war was not just a physical event, it was a manifestation of humanity's inner turmoil. To understand it, one had to look inward. Over the following weeks, Jonathan delved deeper into mysticism and philosophy. He read works by Emerson, Thoreau, and even ancient texts on alchemy and metaphysics. He came to believe that the war was a catalyst for spiritual evolution, forcing people to confront their deepest fears and desires. But this realization did not bring him peace. Instead, it filled him with a profound sense of responsibility. If the war was a mirror reflecting humanity's flaws, then it was up to individuals like him to shatter that mirror and create a new reality. Chapter 5: Crisis and Choice. When Confederate troops occupied Cross Creek, Jonathan faced his greatest test. Ordered to bless their cause, he hesitated. To To comply would betray his principles, to resist might cost him his life and worse, endanger his family. In the end, he chose neither side. Instead, he retreated to the woods, living as a hermit and observing the war from afar. From this vantage point, he saw the futility of it all, the endless cycle of violence, the meaningless sacrifices made in the name of pride and power. Yet his isolation was not without purpose. He continued to write, filling notebooks with musings on the nature of reality, the absurdity of war, and the fragile beauty of human existence. He imagined a future where such conflicts would be resolved not through bloodshed, but through dialogue and understanding. One day, while wandering through the forest, he stumbled upon an abandoned cabin. Inside, he found a dusty copy of Plato's Republic. As he flipped through its pages, he came across a passage about the philosopher king, a ruler guided by wisdom rather than ambition. The idea resonated with him. Perhaps the role of a leader was not to impose order, but to inspire others to seek truth. Inspired, Jonathan decided to return to Cross Creek. He knew the town would never be the same, but he hoped to plant seeds of change, however small. When he arrived, he found the church in ruins, its walls scorched by fire. Undeterred, he began rebuilding it, brick by brick, symbolizing his renewed commitment to faith and community. Epilogue Reflections. Years later, after the war ended, Jonathan returned to Cross Creek. The town was different now, scarred, weary, but alive. Few remembered his sermons or cared about his writings. Yet he continued to write, filling notebooks with musings on the nature of reality, the absurdity of war, and the fragile beauty of human existence. On his deathbed, he penned one final sentence: "Wars are mirrors in which we glimpse our deepest fears, and sometimes, if we're lucky, our highest aspirations."